Today I have with me Vicki Delany, and she is an author extraordinaire. She has written so many books, but the book that I read just recently by her it's Catching a Glare, but it's Elementary She Read, and I love this cover. This is an amazing cover. You know, I'm a reader and I love good covers, and that's why I buy hardback for the most part. If I can get a hardback, I like getting a hardback. You know, a lot of people aren't like me and they like to do Kindle and stuff. I do Kindle if I have to, but I like the hardback. And as you can see, I mean, it's just so worth it when you get a cover like this. It's
Great.
Such a
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, it's such a collector's item. So let's just start at the beginning with you, because when I started researching you, I had no idea how many series and how many books you've written, and I'd like to hear about your journey. Like, when did you start writing all this? I mean, was it a slow thing, or you just like dive right into it?
It was a fairly slow process. I was a computer programmer and then a systems analyst for a big bank. So I was working at the bank, and I had 3 daughters. And one year I just sort of got the idea of writing them a children's story for Christmas, you know, a story and then their names as the main character. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of fun, and I printed that up and I gave it, wrapped it up in ribbon and gave it to them as a present. And I kind of enjoyed the process, so I thought maybe I'd like to learn more about that. So I took a course at community college, and I fairly quickly realized that I didn't want to write for children, but I was enjoying the course. And I thought, well, what could I write that I like to read? And I like to read mystery novels, so I'll try one. So I started a book there. That book took me 4 years to get to finished. I had the kids and I had the job, and time passed and the kids got bigger and moved out of the house and all that. So I was still working at the bank when I published my first 2 books. I wrote my first 3 when I was at the bank. 4, including the one that I just mentioned, which didn't really ever do anything. And then I was lucky enough to be able to retire when I was 55, which I did, and I now write full-time.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I bet it was like everything you dreamed of being able to do was the writing the full-time, you know?
It actually is. I mean, it is. I moved out of the suburbs. I have a little house in the country. My time is pretty much my own. There's nothing I do in terms of my writing career that I don't want to do. You know, it's that kind of a job. If I don't want to go to a conference, I don't go. If I don't want to do something, I don't do it. Yeah, okay, I get edits from my editor sometimes that I don't want to do, but I mean, generally speaking, yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and I found this book on Goodreads, and what I love about Goodreads is that they always put the next, like the most current books coming up, like new releases, and that's how I hop on these as quick as I can, because I like to be, I think this was just published, right? In March
the 14th, yes.
Right, so I love that. I love that it's only been out a couple of weeks like that. I love to, jump on these new books, and they're so good about that. But what amazed me about your writing, and which will make me go back and read your other stuff, because the way you weave a story, I mean, for anybody, okay, let's just talk about it. This is a Sherlock Holmes. This is the first, right, of your series?
Yes.
Okay. So you have do you have a number planned, or are you just going to go for it?
I'm just going to go for it. As long as people want to read them, I'm happy to write them. The second book comes out in September, and it's called Body on Baker Street. And the third book is almost completely finished now.
Wow. Okay. So, but I didn't know much. I know very little about Sherlock Holmes. Okay, I've read some stuff, but I'm not like one of those people that they're out there that are like real big and know everything about him. I'm not. But what I loved is that I learned so much about Sherlock Holmes reading this, and the way you weaved it in the story. It was crazy good.
Thank you. And I hope, because I also felt that I had to draw, walk a fine line, that I don't want to overwhelm people that aren't all that interested in Sherlock Holmes with Sherlock stuff, because it's about the mystery and about the characters, really, right?
Right.
And I'm not a giant Sherlock Holmes fanatic myself. I have read all the original stories. I have seen quite a few of the movie and TV versions, but I can't discuss the minutiae of, details of Sherlock's life. So a lot of that I did have to go and look up.
That's it. And then now have you found, are you in the Sherlock Holmes world because of writing this?
Oh, you mean the real world?
Yeah, like in, people that love Sherlock. I mean, they're going to read this because
I was actually invited to be the speaker at the annual dinner of the Bootmakers of Toronto, which is the Toronto Sherlock group. And I'll explain to you why. You might not know this, but the reason the Toronto group is called the Bootmakers is the only time Canada appears anywhere in the Holmes canon is Sir Henry Baskerville's boot that is stolen was made in Toronto. So that's why they called themselves that. So anyway, I went to that and I gave a talk on it. It was great fun. Yeah.
I have been to Toronto. I've only been to 2 cities in Canada, and that's Montreal and Toronto. And
yeah.
I love Toronto.
Do you know that BoucherCon is going to be in Toronto this year in October? BoucherCon, the big mystery conference.
Nice. Yeah. I've talked to so many Canadian writers, and I just love you guys because you know how to tell a story. Like this book. I'm a homeschooling mom, okay? So I like to read books and then figure out whether I can fit it into my homeschooling somehow because that's what I'm always looking for. And I have 6 children, but I'm down to my last one that I'm homeschooling.
Okay.
All the others now,
yep.
I'm a grandma and the others are older, but I'm down to my 14-year-old. And what I want all my listeners to understand is like, I could give this to my 14-year-old easily to read. But as an adult, it's also just as good. The writing is so clear, and because at first I was thinking maybe it was a young adult book. I mean, is that the genre that this was in? Or?
It's a cozy book, and cozies tend to be much more about characters and about personality than about dark days and dire times. Which I think lends it more to to a younger audience, or lends it as well to a younger audience, I should say. Cozies have by definition, have no swearing or graphic language or sex or on-page violence. Not that teenagers today have never heard a swear word and would be shocked and appalled, but that's another reason that some people think that they're suitable for their teenagers. In a cozy book, you're not ever going to. It's intended to be light. My books in particular are intended to be light. So there's never going to be a terrorist attack. There's never going to be a serial killer. It's going to be someone who is murdered, and the people in the community, for some reason, feel that it's up to them to solve the mystery.
Yes. And that's what I wanted to ask you. Did you ever visit Massachusetts? Like, are you that familiar with that?
I'm not that familiar. I have been there. I went last summer with my daughter just to, check it all out and poke around and that. I had been before. The reason I said it on Cape Cod is I actually wanted the sort of English link, so I wanted it in New England. I wanted a town that had a name with London in it somewhere, so, 220 Baker Street, West London, Massachusetts. And Cape Cod just seemed like a perfect setting for a lot of reasons. In particular, I like to say, my series is set on the Outer Banks, and ocean provides a lot of opportunity for atmosphere. Clouds are rolling in, or it's a bright sunny day, or the characters go to the beach and go for a swim. There's and there's tourists in the town, which is important in a mystery. You have a lot of tourists coming through, otherwise you end up killing, half the population of the town.
Right. And I was thinking about that that's kind of what I love about Sherlock Holmes is that it isn't deep and dark, and it's. And I was wondering, because when I was on your website, I saw the cozy books, and I was like, what does that mean? So I'm really glad you explained that to everybody.
Right. Yeah, because I do write non-cozies as well. My earlier books were non-cozies. I wrote a couple of psychological suspense, and I've written 8 books in the Constable Molly Smith Series, which is about a young policewoman in Canada. And those are not cozies. They're not particularly violent at all, and they don't get into the graphic sex and the swearing, though there is a little swearing because they're cops on the street. Mm-hmm. But it is about more serious issues, and it's about, police dealing with sort of tragedy in people's lives and that sort of thing. So as I said, it's different. Now I'm writing the cozies, and I really like it. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It was a good time in my life for me to start doing that.
Is that a Canadian term? Why did I never hear of the word cozy?
No, it's an American term.
Interesting.
Yeah. Actually, I think they use it in Britain too, and they spell it with an S instead of a Z.
Huh. It's just weird that you're the first person that I've ever, that's why when I went on your website, I was so confused. I was like, what does that mean exactly? I love it. I think it's a great term.
Huge number of cozies out there and cozy readers.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you also wrote some book under an alias, too.
That's the Eva Gates series that I mentioned? Yes, that's the Lighthouse Library series set in the Outer Banks.
Okay. What made you decide why did you want to use the alias?
That was more a publisher's decision. That book was what's called a work for hire, meaning that they came up with the idea and then looked for a writer to write it, as opposed to the normal way, which is the writer comes up with the idea and pitches it to an agent. So because of that, they actually own Penguin. It's Penguin, published by Penguin Random House. They own the copyright. So because they own the copyright, I wouldn't want to use my real name.
I love that. I've never actually heard about anyone doing that. Like, they come up with a book concept, and then they hire you to write it.
Yeah, it's called work for hire, and it's not that unusual.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I've heard of ghostwriters, and they, I've interviewed some, and they can't tell me what they've written, Yeah. So it's not that.
Yeah, this is different than that, because in this one, they gave me the rough, set it in the lighthouse in the Outer Banks, but a librarian, right? That was kind of what I got. Mm-hmm. So everything else is still mine. The details of the character, the sub-characters, the personality of the cat, and that's all mine. So it's quite different than ghostwriting. You're trying to put someone else's words on paper, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and you can't talk about it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so which is always interesting. So let's talk about this book. I love it's really funny. When I started reading it, the name Gemma, I was like, oh, that's such a cute name. I love that name, right? Well, then I come across an author in Australia, and her name is Gemma. We've been writing back and forth, so I was like, okay, it's more of a popular name than I knew that it was, because I thought it was very original name. But
it's actually an English name. You don't hear it in North America much at all.
Maybe that's why she's from Australia, so maybe that makes sense.
Same thing. Yep.
Same thing. So maybe that makes sense. So I love this. Okay, so then it's got the English background. Sherlock Holmes is English. It's set in America, and she's English, but the woman that's her best friend Jane is American. So
right.
Okay, so when you're thinking about how to weave that in, it was just amazing to me. The story just takes. I can't say it enough. Everybody, you need to read this book, okay? Because it is crazy, and I became so attached to their characters. They are so lovable. You made Gemma so lovable. You just want her to be your best friend.
Thank you. Good.
But I always like to talk to authors about how they go about writing. And so when you want to write, say you're going to set out to write this book, are you one of those writers that just sits down and writes it out, or do you sit down and outline and then outline?
Yeah, I outline fairly extensively now. When I first started writing my first number of books, I didn't. It was much more of a seat of the pants sort of thing. But certainly when I got published by Penguin Random House and now these books with Crooked Lane, they want an outline. And you don't have to stick religiously to the outline. They want to make sure the book is going in a direction that they think is okay. But once I started writing an outline, I like doing it a lot. I feel that's the hardest part of all. And once I've got that done, then the hard part's done. So that's my pattern now.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So the hardest part is the outline, and then the story just kind of, when you start writing it, then it just kind of flows off, right?
Pretty much. There are good days and bad days, but pretty much like that, yep.
And you belong to this writers group, okay? That I saw, and I love that idea. Is it a mystery? It's what was the name of it? Crime Writers. Oh, you're the president. The Crime Writers.
Crime Writers of Canada?
Yes.
Crime Writers of Canada is actually a professional writers organization.
Okay.
So it's not a writing group in terms of critique group or anything like that. Okay. It's the same as the MWA, the Mystery Writers of America. So it's the Canadian version of that. And I am actually the past president. I was the president for 2 years.
What is that? What do you do as president of that group?
Well, mainly what the group does is try and promote Canadian crime writing within Canada, which is, believe it or not a very easy thing to do. Canadian crime writers get remarkably little recognition in Canada. So one of the things the group does is try and promote Canadian crime writers to not just the Canadian readers, to Canadian media, Canadian publishers, but to promote our readers to other people, in other places. We go to mystery conferences, and we sometimes, quite often, have a, CWC event, so we'll have some kind of a reception, or even just if there's not many there, we'll have a basket of, giveaways in the auction or something like that. So basically it's to promote Canadian crime writing and Canadian crime writers to readers.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. Well, I think that's interesting because I feel like I've read a lot of Canadian crime stories, so that's good.
Well, go to the website, which is crimewriterscanada.com.
I will, and I'll put that on there too, so everybody else can go to it. But you do belong to like a smaller writing group, right?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
I did in the past. I'm a big believer that a beginning writer needs fairly constant feedback and encouragement of their peers. So in the past I have, but also now that I live way out in the country where I live, I used to go into Toronto. I used to drive into Toronto when I first moved here, like 3 hours to go for dinner with my writing group, and I decided that wasn't something I wanted to do anymore, so I don't anymore.
Well, I always like the idea of a writing group because it makes me, when I used to read a lot of J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, okay?
Yes.
They had a writing group.
Yep,
and
they did.
I forget the name of it. They actually had a name for their writing group. But I always thought it was really cool because back then they didn't have computers and they didn't have email and they didn't have texting but they would get together like every Monday night and show each other their work and critique it. And, I think that's an awesome idea.
And I think that could be a really valuable experience. I really do. And I think I got a lot of it out of it when I was first starting. It's important you get with the right people that kind of understand what you're trying to do and that are critical without being mocking or condemning or, intelligently critical, shall we say.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you have a certain amount of books that you need to write for your publisher every year, or is it up to you?
Well, I do have a contract for the Sherlock Holmes books. It was a 3-book contract. The delivery dates are 6 months apart, which is a lot. Which is actually not a lot. I was
going to say, that doesn't sound like a lot.
No, that's not much. And the delivery dates are 6 months apart. And I finished the 3rd one, so it's up to them now. Hint, hint.
Hint, hint. That's why everybody needs to go out and buy this book. That's some incentive right there. But okay, so then when they're done, like, do they come? Just because I love talking about the publishing world, because there's so much controversy between self-publishing and using publishers, and you've never self-published a book, right?
Yes and no. I kind of did. I had a book that one of my very early attempts that I don't even count was kind of never went anywhere, right? So I thought, well, I'd put it up on Amazon. So I did that. So I consider that self-publishing, really, but I've never really promoted it, and not many people have read it. But I did put it there just as, people would want to see it. It's called Murder at Lost Dog Lake. If anybody wants to have a look at it, you can tell by the title, it's kind of an early attempt. But in terms of, lately, no, I haven't been.
Do you think there's still reasons for publishers to be a part of the writing process?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A good publisher will have a couple of editing stages. They should have a publisher that comes, when they get their manuscript and goes over it and talks to you about, continuity and believability, and maybe they'll say stuff like, I really don't believe Joe would act like this in this point, or they would point out that on page 10 Joe had blue eyes, and on page 100 he has brown eyes, and on page 45 he's blind, something like that. So that's, that's important. Yeah, you can pay somebody to do that for you. There's professionals, authors out there, but if you have a, traditional publisher, they don't charge for that. And then it does that. Then it comes back again with the copy editing, which is really a go-through for spelling, punctuation, grammar mistakes, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. They'll pick up maybe some of the blue-eyed, brown-eyed stuff that got mixed, but it got missed. But it's a pretty important phase, to make sure that sentences make sense and punctuation's right and that kind of stuff. Then theoretically it goes through another round, and then you get the proofs, which are almost complete. I just got proofs for one of my Christmastown mysteries from Penguin the other day, and I found 12 errors. So by this time, it's almost, hopefully, I was able to fix the last 12 errors. But I'm not the only one doing that. They'll have a proofreader, professional proofreader, do it as well. And, mistakes get through. Every time a person handles something, they've introduced the possibility of a mistake. But it's a heck of a lot better than it not getting done, or not getting done by somebody who knows what they're doing.
Right.
So in the writing stage, I think the publishers have a lot to add. But they particularly still in the world have a lot to do with, promotion. Distribution is absolutely key. If your book's not available in a bookstore, you're losing a heck of a lot of readers, because there's still a lot of people who read from bookstores. And same thing with libraries. If you're self-published, you might be able to take your book to your local library, but if you want your book available to library readers throughout North America, you have to have a traditional publisher for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of self-published books that I'm actually shocked when I get to the end that it was self-published. There are those, like, I have read that I'm like, but, it's interesting because when I talk to publishers, and I've talked to a couple of them, they'll say, well, there's when you read them, you can kind of see that something's off. And I did notice that, because I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, you just know. And it is. It's like a spacing. It's like you don't even realize what it is that publishers have down for an easy read, I guess it is for the readers.
It flows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just flows. You should never be aware that you're reading, which is why, even punctuation is important, because if the comma's in the wrong place, it brings you out, jolts you out of the book. Right. And you're aware that you're reading because you're looking to see what's wrong with that sentence. But I know several quite successful authors who are now what they call hybrids. And a hybrid, yes. And I think that there's space for people who've been traditionally published and have a track record. They know the business. They put in all their time learning the skills of the trade. They know to go out and hire a proper editor to have it proofread and that. And plus, they know how to write a book that appeals, and they have an audience. So I think having an audience is the main thing, really, because it's pretty hard to build an audience from scratch.
Yeah, well, right. To just put it out there on Amazon, and then did you have to get an agent first, or did you go right for the publisher when you started out?
Oh, when I started out, I started trying to find an agent, and I didn't get an agent for a long time. My Molly Smith books and my standalones are published by Poison Pen Press in Scottsdale, Arizona. They publish a lot of mystery novels, and they don't require an agent. But since I've been at Crooked Lane and Penguin, I have an agent now.
Oh, you do? Well, that's good for new writers to know. Like, they can go to publishers that don't require an agent,
Yep. Most of the big publishers, certainly the big five, won't look at anybody who doesn't have an agent.
Oh.
But they just have their advantages. Just today, just before I came onto this phone call, I had an issue with, I won't say which one of my publishers. The editor and I disagreed about a few things, so I wrote to my agent and I said, sort of this is the situation. And she said, I'll take care of it. So I'm not the baddie.
Yeah, and because I was thinking about that when you were talking, I was thinking that you moved publishers, but you're dealing with a couple of different publishers for different series. So that's an interesting, way to deal with, in the publishing world. I mean, but then it gets you out there. I mean, how happy were you the first time you signed with Penguin? I mean, that's a huge.
Pretty good. It was pretty good.
It was a pretty good day, right? They don't just sign with anybody, so I think that was a pretty good day for you.
Mm-hmm. It was indeed.
Yeah, so, it's been so interesting talking to you. I mean, everybody, I want you to read, even if you don't, I don't know much about Sherlock Holmes, so I don't want this to put anybody off who does not, or I never read a Sherlock Holmes book. Doesn't matter.
You don't have to, yeah.
If you never read a Sherlock Holmes book, it doesn't matter. I caught on very quickly. The characters are so lovable, and the story is amazing, and I will be reading a lot more of your books now. So
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's been so much fun, but I would like to keep in touch. I want to know where you're going to be. I mean, especially if you're in Pennsylvania, I'd love to come see you. So
I will definitely send you information about my parents. I'm going to be at Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop I believe April the 30th. It's whatever's the Sunday, with Mary Jane Maffini and Linda Wicken, two of my Canadian cozy writer friends. So, Pittsburgh people, come on out.
And thank you for introducing me to the term cozy, because...
Right, and I made a mistake there. It's not in Pittsburgh. Pennsylvania people should come out because Mechanicsburg is not in Pittsburgh.
It's anybody in Pennsylvania you can get to pretty quickly. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Like, Pennsylvania's not that huge. You can get there. So, well, thank you so much, Vicki. It's been a pleasure, and we will keep reading your books, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
Yes, and go to her website too, everybody. The link will be below. And you can go there.
Can I mention that at www.vickydelany.com, spelt VICKIDELANY.
No E.
No E. That's right, no E.
Yes, and it will be posted below. You just be able to click on it and go right to Vicki and find everything. So thanks you so
very much.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.